Brian, what did you stop at the University of Oregon and pick up that pullover you got on there? I mean, they just send that to you? What?
This is when you get to by my age, you got to be as bright as you can because you don't want anybody to go.
You doing well, I hope?
Doing great. Beautiful weather up here in the Northland and watching a lot of football.
I want to ask you about, and I found this stuff the years we worked together. I learned so much from you, not only about football, but about preparation and how hard coaches work, not just head coach, but assistant coaches and so forth. Talk about what challenges there are for the Bengals staff and the Dolphins staff when you just play on Sunday and now you're that Thursday night game. How different is it than preparing from going from Sunday to Sunday?
Well, huge, simply because your teaching mechanism, your routine is so disrupted. You're not going to get anything physically done. You know that, and that's okay. But just in terms of the mechanism of installing the game plan, getting it integrated to the players, my wife always used to joke after we'd play a Thursday night game, she'd say, look, you just did it Sunday to Thursday. Why don't you do it that way every week and just take Friday and Saturday off? And she has a point there, but it does. It's just the disruption and how much you can really focus in on what the other team's going to do. Now, they're in the same predicament. So there's only so much that they're going to be able to throw at you. And teams seem to handle it. Obviously you put a lot of time in the off season getting ready for that short week. You may install certain things in the weeks preceding that or take a time in training camp that's devoted maybe a day or two to that opponent that you're not going to be able to spend the time during the season, particularly if it's an early Thursday night game. Later on in the season, it wouldn't make as much of a difference. So, you do it. It is what it is. The players step up and ready to go. But it clearly does challenge you in terms of your preparation.
When you're talking there about having an early Thursday night game, and this is only the, fourth week of the season, and so the Bengals are getting this one out of the way. The Dolphins are getting this one out of the way. But, you talked about looking at stuff maybe the team did the year prior. In Miami's case, they have a different head coach. They've brought in Tyreek Hill. Tua appears to be a very different quarterback, at least through the first three games, than he was at any point in his career up until now. Does that present an even greater challenge if you're the Bengals coaching staff because of all the things that have changed regarding Miami from a year ago?
Sure. Your preparation, as I said, that you may have done early in the season in anticipation of this short week. Now, you really got to rely on the three previous games in Miami. That game against Buffalo, I've been at this a long time, Tom. I don't think I have ever seen a game. You're talking about a Buffalo team that had 400 yards of passing offense, over 100 yards rushing. They had the ball for 40 minutes. They ran 90 plays compared to Miami's 35 or 36. Miami didn't run the ball, less than 50 yards rushing. Tua was 13 of 20. Buffalo only had one turnover, had 7 explosive plays to Miami's 2, and they lose 21-19. I don't know that I've ever seen a game with that kind of box score. And for Miami to, all but at home, but it's against Buffalo, hot team, and a lot of people think best team in the AFC, coming off a road win, an unbelievable come-from-behind road win in Baltimore, another team that people are kind of thinking, okay, this could be one of the best teams in the AFC. Miami they're on a credible run right now. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens on a Thursday night.
Does playing in that kind of game for Miami, when you're playing down there in that kind of heat, and I recall before the season opener this year where Bill Belichick, when New England was going down there to open the year, took his team down on a Tuesday night because his players had shared with him that they had a hard time acclimating to that kind of heat early in the year. For Miami, now they're used to playing in it, but like you said, especially their defense, they're on the field for 90 plays. And now all of a sudden, they're on a short week. Is that a factor, or are these guys just so highly conditioned that by the time Thursday rolls around, no big deal?
No question about it. That short week and the key. And Miami traditionally has had better success early because people come down into that heat, humidity. They're not ready for it. Look, it's hot and humid for both sides now. The difference is the Miami players live in it every day. They don't just train in it. When you go to the store, you go out to eat, you take your fit. What you just get used to it, right? I mean, I go down to Arizona State for their games, and that 102, 103 temperature kickoff, our guys just, it's hot for them too, but they're just used to it. So there's no question. Everybody's talked about how even in the heyday, New England, when Tom Brady and all that had trouble if they played Miami early in Miami. So it is very real. But you're right. I would be very, very concerned. I can't imagine that the Miami coaches. Heck, you may not even go out on the field this week. You'll just do it with walkthroughs, meetings, hydrate your players, because that not for the defense, 90 plays in that heat, and then turn around and play on a Thursday. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm sure medical opinion would tell you this is what you've got to do and this is what you've got to be careful of. But that's a lot.
Much was made. I'm sure, Brian, you saw the video of Tua when he gets hit and his head slams on the turf. The first instinct naturally for everybody is, okay, this is a head injury. He tries to get up. He's wobbling around. He almost falls down. They take him out of the game. He ends up coming back later and playing in the game. The Dolphins say afterwards, Tua says afterwards, it was a back injury. It wasn't a head injury. In fact, he's not even in concussion protocol, as we found out yesterday afternoon. There's no way in this day and age, there may have been a time, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no way, even though the NFLPA, Players Association, has asked for some kind of investigation as to why he was allowed back in that game, there's no way medical staffs in this day and age can put a player back in there if he's not A-OK, right?
Absolutely. There's no way. Because you've got to remember that concussion protocol, certainly with a team physician, but there's also at every stadium an independent neurologist that also wades in and puts the players through the protocols. So it's as subjective or objective, I guess, as you can get. And when you look at it, because I've seen the player and I've had a sciatic at times, the way it gave, you can kind of, you can see where it would be the back. But the way the protocol's set up, there is no question. And the union's got to go through the procedure anyway. Okay, we're going to protect our players, and they know that it's going to come out, and they follow the protocols, and it's going to be fine because it's very stringent. Because the league. I mean, how many millions did the league have to pay in concussion CTE and all that? You got to believe the league in no way, shape, or form is going to leave themselves vulnerable to anybody questioning the protocol. So it's a tight process, and if they say it's the back, then it's the back.
All right, I want to ask you about a different kind of injury when you're the head coach, and that has to do with Herbert out there in L.A. I mean, I give the kid all the credit in the world. He broke his rib, maybe more than one, in the game 2 weeks ago. They were wondering, would he come back and play? He does come back and play. The Chargers just get wiped out. I mean, wiped out by the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. My question is this. When you have a quarterback, and Herbert's a star quarterback, there's no doubt, but when you have a quarterback that has that kind of injury, and anyone who's ever broken a rib, it literally and figuratively hurts just to breathe. Take a deep breath when you have a broken rib. What's that fine line, Brian, and as a head coach making that decision to go ahead and go with this guy as opposed to sitting him out a week or two?
Well, you talk about a protocol. You go through the progression. First, the player has to say, okay, I'm good to go. All right, I'll take that with a grain of salt, but I know you want to play. Next, it's doc. So is he okay? Can he go? Could he injure it further? What's his vulnerability? And if the doctors say, yeah, we're comfortable with, yes, he can go, then fine. And this is a tough one for the coach. You've got to look at it. You can look at the way he's performing, and you got to make the decision. Okay, can you get out of harm's way? Can you produce at the level we're going to need? And when you go against the player and the medical staff, because you just look at it and say, I don't think he's going to play well enough. That's always tough, and it's tough on the players. Sometimes the player, I've had it where the player goes, yeah, I definitely want to play. And me, I want to tough through it, and the doctors. And then quietly he'll come up to your obstacle coach, I can't play. You got to cover me here. Yeah. You got to be the bad guy. That happens sometimes too. But Herbert, I don't know that people can fully appreciate as a quarterback making the throw. Imagine for those golfers out there, I'm into golf now. Imagine you got your driver and you in your backswing and knowing that the minute you come down and start your follow through, someone's going to hit you in your ribs with a 7-iron. That knowing that pain is going to come, that's going to change your action a little bit. So the kid obviously shows some toughness. Rib injuries are a tough one. They take a long time to heal. Hopefully he'll continue to do that. They may, that was always the questions for the doctors. If I sit him, how much of a percentage will he be better than next week? If it's substantial, it's okay, then I'm going to sit him. If it's minimal, it's okay. If the kid thinks he can play through it, he plays through it. So there's a lot that goes into it.
You mentioned a couple of weeks ago how a team loses the first game, the sky is falling. You lose a second game, and now literally the earth is moving under your feet. Not quite to that level, but, look, Bill Belichick is considered to be the greatest coach in the history of the National Football League, all the Super Bowl titles, so on and so forth. They lose their quarterback in Mac Jones. At least it says for multiple weeks with a high ankle sprain. Again, reflecting back to your days as a head coach. And if I recall, you lost Steve McNair very early in the year, one year, right? And all of a sudden he's out.
First game in Cincinnati.
Right? I remember that. I was at that game. And by the way, I was yelling bad things at you on the sideline, not knowing we'd be partners one day. But I got to ask you, what's the mentality? I know it's all that next man up kind of thing, and Brian Hoyer's been around the block and so on and so forth. But, while Mac Jones may not be among the elite quarterbacks in the NFL yet, perhaps one day he gets there. But when you're looking at your season and moving forward, and all of a sudden you're going, holy Moses, we don't have this guy now. We are in big, big trouble. This is very different than losing, Trey Lance and having Jimmy Garoppolo to fall back on, right?
Yeah, it's always tough. Nothing shakes an organization more to its core than having to make a change at quarterback, either due to injury or bad play. And you're right, the next man up is a great mentality. The problem is the next man up isn't as good. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the next man up, right? I mean, that goes by definition. So the New England Patriots have been through it before, but they've been through it before when they had really good teams, when they lost Tom Brady and they had Matt Cassell. I'm trying to remember the guy that came in and actually played pretty well for a bunch of games. But they were a pretty good football team. This is an okay football team. It's not a great football team. So yeah, that makes a huge difference. And the Patriots will rally around it. And the good thing is that the coach, they know that the coach isn't going anywhere. So we can't quit here because I'm still accountable to that guy. So the problem for them is as they go forward now, they got to go to Green Bay. Not an easy place to play. Then they play the Lions at home. They go to the Browns. The Browns are playing well. Then they play the Bears and the Jets. So their schedule is every schedule is tough in the NFL. Going to Green Bay with your backup quarterback, that's not an easy task. So yeah, so you're sitting there and staring at maybe 1-3, and now have to play the Lions all but at home. Yeah, it's tough duty.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about, the first two games of the year, the Bengals faced the Tampa 2 defense over 32% of the time in their opener against the Steelers and then in the second game against Dallas. They faced the Tampa 2 2% of the time in the game against the New York Jets. What I'm getting at is Robert Saleh is without a doubt an outstanding defensive football coach. But how hard is it, or is it hard at all of a sudden be playing one style or one philosophy of defense to now all of a sudden try and maybe change that up to counter an opponent who clearly is having issues with a certain style of defense? Is that hard to do?
Well, no, first off, it's what you got to do. What you do. The biggest mistake you make is look at film and say, "Oh, look what that team did. Let's do that." And it's not you. I don't know. I haven't looked at the Jets all that much. Maybe they're not a cover 2 team. It's not inherent. Everybody has Tampa 2 in their system. Whether they should play more, why they didn't. I think clearly the difference was the pressure they could put on the quarterback. And with Joe Burrow, what we're seeing is it's a sliding scale. Sacks go down, touchdowns go up.
Yeah.
Okay. Sacks go up, touchdowns go down. Okay. And so it's the pressure you put. So if you sit in a cover 2, then that means you're just getting a 4-man rush. Maybe a 5 if you try to be creative, but with a cover 2 and the nature of the defense, that doesn't add up, leaves holes in the defense. So they may think, well, we got to get pressure on Joe Burrow. And what the first couple teams were able to do was to sit in that Tampa 2, yet still get pressure with a 4-man rush. And the Jets may have felt like we can't get home with a 4-man rush. We got to do it with 5 and 6 guys. And obviously it didn't work because they only got 2 sacks and Joe Burrow had a good day with 275 yards and 3 touchdowns.
All right, my friend, I tell you, I'd like to be didn't you tell me Lamar Jackson's mom is his agent? Before I let you go, I mean, I'd like to have that gig right about now, all that cash staying in the family, so to speak, if mom gets her percentage. How
about Lamar? How about whatever contract that is going, hey, I don't have to pay an agent percentage. How cool is that?
Right.
That's
I'm paying
good.
mom.
Yeah, well, that's different. You're going to pay mom anyway, so now it's awkward to fill. Yeah, he was spectacular, and like I said, numbers I've never seen before. They got to play Buffalo. Interesting, to see coming up the Ravens and Buffalo. What kind of matchup that is? I'm going to be interested, particularly a Buffalo team that's kind of hurting right now. Going, we this isn't going to stand. We got to come back and play well, and it's in Baltimore.
Well, that prompts me actually for one last question that I meant to ask you earlier when we were talking about Buffalo and all the gaudy numbers they had offensively in the loss to Miami. Brian, you were considered one of the great offensive minds in football history, and we've talked about this before. A team can't win, can they, Brian, regularly? I made this comment that if the Bills are throwing the ball 55 times or 63 times as they did last week in a game, you're not going to the Super Bowl playing that way.
Well, we could say the same thing. If your quarterback's carrying the ball 10, 15 times a game, can you go to the Super Bowl that way? Baltimore, you could ask the same thing. Yeah, Buffalo, clearly, they're playing great defense. Now, they were without 4 defenders, not to make an excuse for them. So their defense wasn't as good. Like I said, it was the most unique game because the offense played well. I mean, the numbers don't lie. Now, they weren't able to get into the end zone as much, and that's always a factor. To rely as much as they do on a Josh Allen, yeah, but how much did the Packers rely on Aaron Rodgers? How much does Tampa Bay rely on Tom Brady? They need to get the running game cranked up a little bit. Allen is a factor in the running game next to Lamar Jackson. They're the biggest factor at quarterback in the running game that any team has. But that's what they do. And they've been very productive at it. So, yeah, I think that particularly if the defense is playing well and they're healthy, I don't think they have to. You always have that question when you have a Lamar Jackson or you have a Josh Allen is, okay, well, how many designed runs are we going to have? Because you're going to have a certain amount of them organically just with scrambles. So you got to think, what's our pitch count here on a guy like Jack, big physical guy? You don't want him taking too many hits. How many called runs are we going to have? They're certainly going to factor that in terms of how much they want him to carry the ball because he's going to do a certain amount of it organically.
All right, buddy. Brian, thanks so much for your time. Tell your bride, Kim, we said hello, and the rest of the gang, too, kids, grandkids, the girls, and everybody, and the boys, and we'll catch up next week. Thanks for your time, buddy.
Good. Sounds great.
All right, Brian Billick, our NFL Insider. Nobody better to have talking about the National Football League.